Well, thanks for joining us. And thanks, Alexi, for putting this on. Really appreciate it. So I guess I'll just give an introduction on Cal Poly Blockchain Club, where so Sophia and I are coming in this year to run the club. The previous president, Eric Cuellar, has been pretty busy doing his own projects on the Celo blockchain. So we're kind of coming in and I guess reviving the club now that school is coming back to in person, and there's going to be a bunch of new students coming into our school, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. But yeah, our club is mainly just focused on getting students interested in blockchain programming, specifically Solidity and Ethereum. But because our interests kind of also lie with the Celo blockchain, we want to maybe think about projects there. So I'll just give it to Sophia to introduce herself, and we can go from there.
Yeah, so Max did a pretty good job. I'm a co-president with Max at the Blockchain Club at Cal Poly. For the past 2 years, I've been working at Amazon as a developer, and I'm definitely ready to leave the FANG and then basically get more involved with crypto. It's been really interesting and exciting running the Blockchain Club with Max. And we're super grateful to basically have Eric kind of show us the ropes and get us really interested in the Celo blockchain. So yeah.
Sweet. So Jarrell, do you think, so is it Jarrell or Jarrell, or how do you?
It's Jarrell.
Jarrell? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, again, thanks for coming and speaking with us. I know we have a pretty here with more people coming in, but do you think you can give us kind of an introduction of like how you got into crypto and kind of like what your grand vision is for how you can get into this space?
Yeah. So I was, sorry if it's a little bit loud at all. Yeah, so I was actually at Cal Poly at one point, and that was a long time ago. And I was like involved with various things, like a ski club. And at one point, somebody tried to pay for a ski club trip with some Bitcoin, and I was kind of like, "What?" But it was like just like this random like comp sci guy, and I was kind of like, I don't think that we have the infrastructure here to be able to take on like some Bitcoin payments. But it was pretty interesting. I was a comp sci undergrad, and then I was a philosophy master's. So I was like interested in the philosophy of tech already and techno-solutionism. So I was kind of just intrigued, but then I didn't really get to it. I was running the newspaper. Wow, sorry y'all. New York City does not know how to be quiet. I was running the newspaper at my grad program, and I was like the business manager of it. And I started to get like more intrigued by blockchain stuff. So I just started like putting some of my paycheck into Bitcoin at the time. And then I built a mining rig, and I thought that was be cool. It was not actually that profitable. Even back then, like it still was like really hard to like figure out what I was doing. But it kept me in like the zeitgeist of it all. And then I met a dude named James Prestwich in Salt Lake City. And he was running on something called Storage, and Storage was not on Ethereum yet at that time. It was like just like its own thing. I thought the idea of decentralized storage was really cool. And then Storage like actually reissued its token basically on once Ethereum was live, and you could do that stuff on Ethereum. Token sales that happen, and I was involved in that. I was involved in the community, and I was like, yeah. So this is real, because until that point, I'd really just kind of reviewed a lot of white papers, and kind of used my education to create value in that way. And I was getting paid in like Litecoin at the time, and then ETH kind of came on the scene, and all this stuff happened so fast that it was just like a whirlwind. And the one thing that really kind of was like a good North Star was like I was making good friendships. And so I was like, yeah, these are pretty cool people to be friends with, and I enjoy them. So I guess I'll keep like working on this crazy weird stuff with people. And so I just like kept doing white paper reviews, and I would I would help people like reduce like their 60-page white papers to like 11 pages. That was like my first like cut my teeth nonsense. And then I started like getting more involved in actually helping build projects or collaborate. Stuff like TBTC, which is like a trustless bridge between ETH and Bitcoin, I found really interesting because I thought tribalism was dumb. And that was kind of weird in 2018 to really start trying to like push on that. And that led me to kind of having to do a lot more actual advocacy. And like nobody, like if you can't get other people to like listen to what you're writing, you got to just start like saying it out loud. And so I went to MIT Bitcoin Expo, and just everything kind of spiraled forward from there. And then I was publishing a paper on mobile first infrastructure that I just wasn't even like about crypto. It was just about like the need for like ease and other things like utilizing touch gesture swiping for like actual shorthand for syntax. Because I come from Ethiopia originally, and like all the people I know in Africa are like pretty huge barrier of entry to like even get involved in Solidity if you want to just talk about blockchain like programming, because you need a laptop. And so how do you foster dev talent and like show people that they actually have like the way that's useful for this type of like industry? Can't even get them a laptop, so why not try and like build more mobile first infrastructure for fostering dev talent? Gave a talk at ETH Denver for it. And then Celo was there. They were in attendance, and I'd never heard of Celo, and they were like, we're doing a lot of mobile first infrastructure, right? And I was like, no, I have no idea who you are. And so I met Merrick, and Merrick like talked to me for a little while, and I was like, all right, you seem like you know what you're talking about. And then I read the white paper. I did a lot of due diligence, and I was like, okay, I think you said that kind of let me speak pretty openly about the needs of like the developing world. Which I prefer not to call the developing, like the leapfrog nations. But yeah, so that was how I got involved with Celo, and here I am.
I like it. That's a long journey, I guess, because now you're focused on developer relations, and I assume way back when you first heard about Bitcoin and started playing around with that, you probably didn't think of yourself as being in this position here now, right?
Job existed. I think really what happened was like as the the chaos of the industry started to like funnel down and shake out, some people were good at talking to developers, and some people were good at talking to investors, and then some people were good at talking to the community, and then like a small subsection of us were talking to everyone, and it kind of turned into a role, I think. But yeah.
I like it. Now, given that Celo is really focused on social impact and banking the unbanked population of the world, did you kind of like see that mission from the get-go when you first heard about Celo, and that's what sparked your interest to like go further, and or what, how did that go? Like, did you talk to Merrick and he kind of gave you the gist of what Celo was about?
When I talk to Merrick, I'm pretty forward about what I think, and I'm very blunt about my like opinions on things. So when I it's like, can you explain to me how this is Ethereum for Africa, and how this isn't like, white saviorism to some extent? And so I was really open. I think I was talking to you, Max, about like my aversion, like my interest in wondering whether or not like techno-solutionism is actually a viable way of bridging like the gaps between emerging markets and like the Western world. And so I was kind of like, is this realistic techno-solutionism, or is this like digital imperialism that you guys are doing? Are you like trying to harness transactions from these communities? And I was pretty harsh, and I was like really putting it through the ringer, and Merrick was just a gem. Like, he was just very open, was like, yeah, I mean, we've built an open platform, and we're hoping to attract developers from all over the world, and we're hoping to attract people like you that are highly critical and to help us like build something better and bigger. And since Celo had like not really launched yet, it was really something where I was like, okay, I can't project all of my like concerns about the rest of the techno solutionism of like digital imperialism of the world onto like this project that hasn't launched yet. These people seem nice and they seem like they know what they're talking about, but they also seem like they're open to hearing, you know, the opinions of everyone and from all over. I'm happy to say, like, yeah, that's been my experience, and Merrick's been great. He's given me a lot of agency and brought on great people to like help and support and lead different initiatives, and it's been like, it's kind of a daunting task to say like, oh, remember when everyone thought of, like, everyone wanted to bank the unbanked at one point, right? And now, like, once the second that ETH became worth anything, that realistically, that dream kind of died. Exist, and the overall like use case of Ethereum became DeFi, which had a really high barrier of entry already, and a high barrier of entry for like intellectualism. So it became like a really interesting position that they were still committed to banking the unbanked, and that they were doing it from the mobile first aspect. And since I was writing papers on that, I mean, like, if you look at the way like WhatsApp actually got traction, it was by being basically a primitive chat app on feature phones or entry-level smartphones in developing nations. And so that was pretty much what they were pitching, was like, we can get integrated and we can do this with these countries. But it also became more than that now that I've been here for a long time. It's like, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have seen some of the initiatives we do, and I'm actually starting to hesitate towards not being, I think we should highlight a lot of the work we're doing around the world, but we should also highlight that, like, it's just an open source network and everyone can succeed and create prosperity here. And it's actually going to be easier to bank the unbanked if the talent from Ethereum like redeploys itself onto like a mobile first blockchain. And everybody kind of like goes back to why they got into it in the first place. And you don't have to abandon your like whatever 17,000 APY yield on like a protocol on ETH or anything like that. But like, there's, you know, there's side projects to be launched. There's ecosystems to be involved in, and like the mobile first world isn't going anywhere. If you look at the progression of tech for Web 2, it's like, I think banks just now really got to mobile apps for banking in like the last like 7 years, probably when you guys were just entering high school. And so it's not realistic to just to think that Web3 won't do the exact same thing. And I don't know if any of you have ever used the MetaMask mobile browser, but it's essentially like what we're going for in a lot of ways. And so like the more of these projects like integrate Celo and utilize Celo and become available to these people, the better.
Yeah. That's interesting. So speaking of Ethereum in the context of Celo, right? Celo is a fork of Ethereum with proof of stake and you know, mobile focused with phone number mapping for public keys. And there's a whole like system, there's a whole architecture for Celo that has to do with like pretty much providing like these private and public key pairs for like easy transactions and easy communication.
Talking about Otis, like the phone number mapping.
Yeah.
I'm gonna brag about Otis for a real quick second. The one downside of Celo is they don't beat their chest enough. And like the light client identity mapping, which is essentially like, okay, the dream of Ethereum in like 2016 to 2017 was that we would bank the unbanked. To make like client identity mapping work, say like we need to make it to where like people could have Ethereum on their phones, and that was impossible. A lot of people tried. A lot of people who are now my friends tried, and I watched them fail. And everyone kind of gave up. And it was actually a really important catalyst as to like why people gave up on the idea of banking the unbanked. And Otis is really interesting, and no one knows about it exists other than like people know that with Valora you can connect your phone number to a blockchain address, and therefore you can like have an identity with the phone number, and therefore a bank account. People know that about Valora, the app specifically, but I don't think that they realize that was like technology that was like figured out by Merrick and a number of others. Like a couple of years ago, they've been working on this whole time, and on someone like that is well into like 92%, and really optimizing the process. And we like client ceremony, which is like a bunch of real people from all over the ecosystem, ETH included, a lot of Ethereum folks that are like running supercomputers in their houses on their, and just like syncing their machines to create the basically to sync up all of these like partial nodes running on people's cell phones with the actual blockchain network. And so it's actually like a two-pronged, really cool system. It's like uses ZK snarks. Plumo is a ZK snark ceremony. It's a really cool system that actually requires like this almost like romantic existence between like those in it's utilizing the cell phones and running partial nodes, and then those who are like deep in Web3, like the Hudson Jamesons, the Anna Roses, the Tuxes, the myself, Yaz, all these people who are like all a part of these different projects, taking the time out of their day to be like, hey, you guys want to get together, do a Zoom call, drink a beer, and like sync up all our machines and just like make this whole network run. And it's super fun, and it's actually like, yeah, really romantic techno relationship.
I like
but yeah,
it.
I just wanted to brag about Otis because no one brags about Otis and no one uses it. Everyone's trying to do DIDs these days, like decentralized identity. And it's like, yeah, we have like so many products that aren't really, we don't even consider products at Celo.
Mm-hmm. Well, so do you think that given the phone number mapping and Otis, and also the mobile friendly approach, or the mobile focused approach actually, and then that together in the addition of stable coins, do you think all of those three together are kind of like the main selling points of Celo and the main differentiators between Celo and Ethereum?
So I think the DID stuff is really cool and really interesting. Without more people understanding that it exists, it's gonna take a second to catch on, because I think we need like refocus people to be like, oh, that's right, I guess I did solve that. But since we got so many things going on, it's hard to like, you know, allocate resources of marketing and things like that. But it works for us, and we use it for like Valora, right? And then Valora is being integrated into Pool Together. It's being integrated into Curve, like this newest initiative that we're doing. So at the very least, we're like bringing the idea of phone number mapping to all these ecosystems. And once they realize that it can happen, they might just like take it from there. So the other part of your question is like, basically you're asking like, is this a triple threat? Like, is it enough of a combination that actually solves the problems of like this banking the unbanked, or even like creating decentralized brands? Like, you know, there is like 5.6 people with cell phones, and it's not just people in emerging markets. Like people in the developed world are really interested in having these DeFi protocols like on their phones. Really important, but one thing that I think is like under indexed when it comes to the currency of attention would be the stable coins. I think it's not every day that you see like a 8x over collateralized treasury running just like 2 stable coins for the sake of having like something that's a usable asset for all like millions of people. But the one thing that I think is like blowing my mind is that how many stablecoins have tried, like, you know, regular stablecoin like cabals of people trying to maintain a peg, as opposed to like these algorithmic stablecoins that have happened these last year. Like Fei Protocol was one of them, and they have tried to maintain an algorithmic, try to gamify the system, all this stuff, and it's crashed, right? It's all been like crashed and burned and not worked. And we've had this system running, and it's maintained a closer peg than anyone else. And then like this whole, like in the May 19th crash stats, you should see how like Celo maintained stronger than anyone else. And it has to do with the fact that like we have this treasury that's actively maintaining the peg. But at the same time, I want to see more volume happen with the stable coins, like really test it. And so with these DeFi initiatives and like the launch of a bridge coming soon, I'm really excited personally to start like taking a crap ton of C Euro and just taking it across chain and putting it in different protocols, and like encouraging other people to do that as well. Because greater use of the stablecoin, like the greater value of the Celo native asset, sure, but like at the same time, no one's really proven that a program stablecoin can exist with like giant amounts of volume and like people actively try to game the system. And I'm pretty confident, and I'm 100% confident that I actually want to throw my weight behind this one. This one actually works really well, and time tested slowly. There's thousands and thousands of example, like even in just impact markets UBI, there's 19,000 users utilizing that, which is something that other stablecoins don't have. They don't have like this like actual balance system, this counterweight to DeFi degens trying to wreck the system. So I think the stablecoins is actually where we will find our stride as the mobile first approach is just like a great ways, but the stablecoins I think as like a medium all the other ecosystems, like all the other layer ones, they have to actually put a lot of work into creating a stablecoin, right? And so it doesn't make sense that if we have a bridge for them not to utilize our stablecoin and just use it as basically like a stablecoin vertical for us.
Mm-hmm. So Jarrell, you mentioned that like there's this triple threat, right, of the mobile first approach, the stable coins, and all that. Do you think we could shift focus a little bit and just talk about kind of the approach that Celo is taking with their stable coins? So I know the different types of stable coins are, you can have fiat backed, you could have crypto backed stable coins, and then you can have algorithmic stable coins. Can you talk a little bit about how fellow stable coins like CUSD and CEUROs are different than other stable coins?
Yeah, it's super deep. It's super interesting because like what happens is you basically have a treasury that's running like stablecoins oftentimes. Sorry, somebody was trying to talk to me. You have a stablecoin that's trying to run treasury off this treasury, but like, are you just gonna have Celo in that treasury? Because that doesn't really make sense. If you're being realistic, you have to recognize that like the market is volatile and anything could happen to your layer one at any point, right? And so that would be too easy of like an attack vector to some extent. Like imagine just like losing one validator set on a network, you kind of be screwed. So what's really cool is that it's over collateralized in Bitcoin, ETH, DAI, and Celo, the native assets. So that's actually like, I think part of the reason why I was so interested is like, okay, the core, like the core protocol like is running, but is also, it's like already interested in this like interoperability, like not really interoperability, like working with those assets, but like utilizing those assets as a multi-collateral treasury is super interesting, especially for like a layer one to start off. Like a layer one to like start off and then nod at like all these other legacy layers. A good intention and also like super useful. But one of the cool things about it is like, yeah, this collateral, this treasury is over collateralized. It has a crap ton of Celo in it, and obviously the more the stable coins you utilize, the base asset Celo goes up in value because it's actively like burning and minting itself. Sorry if that was loud. It's actively burning and minting itself in order to maintain like this peg. But the other thing is that the community at any point can like submit a governance proposal. We want to add this new stablecoin, like we want to add cReal from Brazil, we want to add the Naira for Nigeria, and so the more that we penetrate these emerging markets, people who actively actually need to have quick value transfer of like currency, I'm really excited to see more. Like I get, yeah, USD is cool, it's useful for a lot of people, especially in Western society. It's going to be really cool. And there's like Naira and there's like cReal, and you see like all these different communities like excited about their own currency being represented in the digital space, and then watching them get utilized cross-chain, watching them get utilized inside of the Celo ecosystem, watching the arbitrage opportunities between like cReal and like where it's up against, but it's one of those things where I don't see that opportunity anywhere else. I don't see a place where like there's an inclusive enough community, first of all, but also like there's an active enough community globally that this demand for currencies that may fall by, like I would be hard pressed to, I bet if you asked the entire crypto industry what the of Nigeria is, good 90% of them would actually draw blank. So, so it's like, yeah, I think that stuff is really cool, but it also like brings visibility to these communities.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that a government issuing their central bank digital currency on Celo is maybe a better idea or a worse idea than like a more like, a decentralized governance proposal to add that same currency, like to add a currency that is representative of that country? Like, which one do you think
You're saying is it more realistic to actually have, instead of each one of these individual currencies being added and proposed, like, can a central bank just launch their CBDC on top of Celo,
mm-hmm.
and then that would be utilized by everyone, right? Yes, and I get where you're coming from there, but actually I don't know how bullish I am on CBDCs right now, because it comes like, see, like a metaphor, I suppose. Like it feels like there's somebody who was always the guy who, and he was always the party thrower, and then like you're throwing a party and he's like, oh hey, let's party, let's like join up and join forces and like throw this party together. But he's coming to try and throw this party with you after the party's already started and it's already like a success. Like it's not really necessary to me in a lot of ways. I think the CBDCs are really cool, and it's like if they do launch, they should launch on Celo, because it makes the most sense if for like the actual use cases or the users around the world that would be interested. But at the same time, like, central banks are essentially designed to maintain power. They're designed to hold and not really release power. So for me, I've talked to a lot of people from this industry, and it seems like the central banks are interoperability. If they launch, they would probably launch a CBDC, and then they might say something like, cool, well now we're going to make an interoperability standard that all the rest of you have to like adapt to and adopt onto, and then like you guys need to make your stable coins adopt our interoperability standards, or like Celo needs to be interoperable with our CBDC, which doesn't make sense because they're not the best builders in the space. Like they wouldn't have the most wherewithal. And by the way, maybe I should say this is like my own personal opinion. I don't know if this matters, but I think that with the ability, especially with like central bank digital currencies to like launch on something like Celo, it really just creates like another asset that might have like a little legitimacy behind it. But at the same time, to create our central bank, like we can create our own stable coins that represent all these different communities, and like still like a in the world. So like if you could just transfer a C Naira into CUSD, what do you need the central bank for? And that's what my thesis has been for a long time, was when the advent of stablecoins like first came around, it was like, I don't think the banks are really that scared by crypto until they came across stablecoins. I think the banks were then very, very scared of crypto because we've figured out the secret sauce that they've been doing for generations. So if you can make something equal $1, it's super useful, and it's actually all the banks have been doing for like a long time. So they just so yeah, I guess if that answered your question, let me know.
Yeah, I kind of had a question going off of that, actually. So obviously in early August, the Securities and Exchange Commission chair put out a statement basically saying that he wants to regulate crypto. And I feel like that might have been spurred, obviously, by the rise of stablecoins. I was going to ask, how do you see US government regulation changing the future of stablecoins? And what are the discussions you're having in this community about that in general?
I think that's a really good question. I think it's a really, really good question. Sorry about all the horns. So there's a lot of fear and like, you know, like, oh, are they going to come for us? Are they going to come for us? However, I kind of find myself going back to like base human traits, which is there's a lot of money that's been made. There's a lot of impact that's been made. And there's a lot of people from the banking industry that are involved in creating this money and creating this impact. There's a lot of ETFs launching. There's a lot of these like hedge funds that are adopting the assets into their portfolios. There's just like this slow burn happening. That happens when what happens when an unmovable object is hit by like an unending. And that's kind of what I'm seeing happen. And obviously, I'm sure millions of people have said this at this point, like of the early internet, maybe not millions, but it is like the early internet. And if you look at like the way that the people who are afraid of losing power try and regulate those early industries, it's really similar to what's happening now. Because, and I don't mean to sound like this is a conspiracy theory, but it's just like blatantly like the obvious truth. Like when you work in the private sector for finance, how close you are to the municipal sector is stupidly close. And like Obama like hired people from the banking industry, and like the banking industry hires people from like Washington DC as they're done with the campaigns. So everybody's like really incestuous. So when I see like these crypto and I see these, I'm still like brought back to the base traits of human nature, which is like, I kind of feel like all you people are going to want to make a bunch of money, and you're all just going to try and make rules and laws that allow for you to make most money that you can. But at this point, a lot of people on the crypto side of things that are also playing that game and can play that game just as well. And I think you're seeing it like with the legislation that passed, with like that huge fight that happened over like the bill. Like we have way more of a voice than we did 3 years ago, and I think it's really naive to assume that we aren't about to 10x that voice by now, if that makes sense. I would love to see them try and regulate crypto. I think that regulation is important, but I think it also has to have realistic input and standards and comprehension. And I really don't think that the government force, like it's almost like you're telling them, we don't need you. You, in theory, realistically we could choose not to like listen to you at all. We want to listen to you, but like you also need to listen to us. The base like foundation of crypto is that we could actually just do it without the government. And so I think that fear is very real for them and is understood. And no matter like they can't close the box. They can't close Pandora's box at this point. So I would imagine that regulation won't be as scary and crazy as like the SEC threatens around like yield farming. Like, I'm sorry, if I can earn interest on my bank account up to like 5% interest for like some banks and stuff, then what the hell are they talking about? Like you can, like, it doesn't make any sense. Like if you're offering yield on the stablecoin, how is that any different than the banks offering yield on the United States dollar sitting in the bank account? It doesn't make any sense. It's blatant misunderstanding, or it's purposeful misunderstanding. And
I kind of had another question going off of that one as well. So I think you kind of answered this or alluded to this, but do you think stablecoins will entice more people to get interested in crypto, kind of in the Western market that are more conservative about their investments? And how far away do you think we are from a world where people reference stablecoins as often as they reference their TV? It's so common, it's almost in every home and widely accepted.
well, the good news is stablecoins are really hard to do. And so the best part about that is like, there's a lot of crypto projects. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of crypto projects. What is the realistic ability of us to sit here and go, oh, this is a good one, that's a bad one. This is a good one, that's a bad one. It's not easy for everyone to like understand what is like a project that's worthwhile, because it's going to take a few years for them to actually come to fruition. It's pretty out whether or not it's going to work. And another fun thing is like, even if it fails, it does seem to get a lot of people like interested in the community to try and make it work. Like these like underdog aspects that's happened for like Faye and what's her name, the other one, and I think it was like Titan, yeah. And so they're really hard to do. And so I think that I'm bullish on stablecoins. Like my initial fear is that there would be thousands of people, thousands of projects that tried to launch thousands of stablecoins. which would be super annoying. And to some extent, there's a lot of people that have tried to launch stablecoins. Very few people have tried to launch algorithmic stablecoins, which is better, and will, like, when it works, it's better. But I think that it's not something that we'll maybe like talk about every day. But I think since there's probably going to be so few that actually succeed and capture attention, capture users, it could easily become like the back end to a lot of like what Western Union's doing, a lot of what like Visa has tried to get involved in. Like, can I have a debit card that's directly tied to my CUSD, like for all my stable coins? Yeah, easily. And so as that starts happening, then I think you're going to start seeing people be like, oh, why do you use that card that uses stable coins and doesn't use the dollar? You're like, well, I'm getting rewards on my stable coins. I'm actively just spending the yield I'm earning on like 6 different pools. I'm kind of in charge of my own banking, and I'm making a lot of promise and prosperity for myself and for those around me. And it's like, that's kind of a hard value prop to fight against when you're dealing with like a super old industry like banking. They can't really move that quickly. So I think that's where you'd see the meme factor and the general zeitgeist, not just like the crypto zeitgeist, take on this idea when they're like, oh, I guess banks are kind of for boomers. Like that's I think the narrative that.
Do you think that to put it your way, like these boomers in the traditional banking system, let's say that they come in and they regulate stable coins in a really negative way. Do you think that'll like maybe cause stable coins, especially like Celo stable coins, to become more centralized? Or do you see like, I guess, the decentralized aspect of stablecoins like going away the more there's government regulation?
No, because the current way the regulation is like structured, they push for more decentralization. Like I think right now they give you like 4 or 5 years. Like so you sell security, it's like you have about a year to achieve true decentralization, which I don't know what their standards currently are for that. But the one thing that I think is great is this idea of banning something. You gotta take a step back, like from a 10,000 foot view. It's like if any one country bans something, there becomes an arbitrage opportunity for another country. And like you've already seen a number of ways and a number of places, but like it's a lot of money, it's a lot of assets, it's a lot of value that's just gonna like leave the country if that's the way they play it. So I don't see that really being realistic for especially stablecoins. But I think that for stablecoins as a whole, it's like, I think it just needs to become more, like people need to understand more. Like I was really excited by the understanding the industry from Congress in the United States and stuff recently, but I still think it fell short. And I'm just having to hope that years from now, it'll be a little bit more educated and like faster legislation that actually is very crypto positive will happen. We have a lot of good people on the ground in Washington, D.C. working on that type of stuff. Shouts out Coin Center. And then, yeah, if your question is also like, would they have to become centralized? Yeah, I don't think so. I think that would actually be the opposite of what the banking industry would want, because then they really are just like creating another bank. Mm-hmm. And if a stablecoin has the ability to get like a lot of users overnight, unlike the United States dollar or something like that, like that's super scary. But yeah, if you ever like look at, it's really interesting if you look at how fast, like, I wish I could find it really quickly, but it's like shows all the different currencies that have been global currencies that are like accepted everywhere, and it shows like the timeline of it from like I think early 1200s like up through like now. And it's like, okay, so when the British pound became globally accepted, it took like this many years, and it's something like 100 years. And then like Spain took like even longer. Portugal actually didn't take that long. Amsterdam took a while. The Dutch took a long time. And when you look at like cryptocurrency, it's something that's super impressive, because like if you say like the global population at the time was maybe around like 1 billion people in like the 1400s or something like that, then like crypto has reached 1 billion people, and stablecoins have probably reached 1 billion people, 1 billion users within the next like couple of years. Sorry, you should just ask another question because this guy's blasting some music.
Well, my next question was actually going to be kind of on a different topic, which is like universal basic income and Celo's like relationship to that, and how stablecoins can be used to do like trials of universal basic income for unbanked people in the world. Do you have any? Maybe can you give a little bit of like a summary of cLabs's interests in that regard?
So this is something I like really can't talk about enough. Like I love this concept, this idea, and it's just like putting your money where your mouth is, which is like what I was telling you. I like really was asking Merrick some hard questions when I first met him. It's like this is one of the like this exists, right? And so there's a group called Impact Market. Marco and Bernardo they're like, Bernardo's the lead engineer, Marco's the CEO, and they're doing amazing work, right? So what the whole premise there is like, okay, can we take a treasury and can we distribute it across like thousands and thousands of different like mobile apps that are like the Impact Market mobile app, to where people are able to like connect their Valora account and immediately withdraw like anywhere between like 70 to 50 cents a day, depending on like how many users are online, what your regional pairing is to the United States dollar, and just like, yeah, sure, it's like cents, and that doesn't seem like crazy, like, oh, you got 70 cents today, but I mean, in a country like home country of Ethiopia, that's a shit ton. I mean, that's a lot of money, and like, and so you're taking a group of people and maybe like 10,000 people. Now it's like 19,000 going on 20. And that's just like the beginning. Where I think is going to get way more interesting, and what I'm actively like trying to fund right now with the governance proposal, is you take that same existing system, and instead of doing a donation-based treasury, which is that's what it is, people are donating Bitcoin, ETH, Celo to like these addresses, and then they're converting that and using it to run the treasury, right? Well, screw that. You should just, everyone who launches on Celo, like Aave when they come, Curve when they're coming, Sushi, like there should be the option when I have a liquidity pool, like the same way when I check out a grocery store and decide whether or not I want to give like $1 to some kind of research or some kind of community for charity, I should have the opportunity to toggle a switch and it donates of the liquidity pool automatically to when Impact Market UBI system. You're creating of like continuous prosperity, donation-based prosperity. And so like an Impact Market's working on this as well. Like they're aware of this idea. We talk a lot, and that's what I'm really excited for, because then it becomes, you've managed to bridge degenerate behavior, like DeFi degens, with actual like engine of prosperity and creating actual value who need it the most. And so these UBI systems are like, yeah, they're currently experiments. I believe the Impact Market is the largest UBI experiment that's ever been done. Like that includes the UN. And it's because it's built on a super fast blockchain, but it's also because it's built on one that's mobile first. And the mobile first aspect of it is something that like the UN couldn't figure out. No one else has really been able to figure out because they didn't really have the developer engineering talent maybe, but it's something that is like a huge value add for these communities. And there's been some super awesome like research wherein like we started to create vendors on like when the project was first launching. We had vendors in Brazil that were accepting CUSD, and so like people could start trying to spend it there. And there was one address, obviously we don't know who these people are, but there was one address that just kept coming to this one vendor every single day, and they would spend their like 70 cents. And that eventually we got in contact with the vendor, and we're like, when this person comes, would you ask them if they wouldn't like mind if we knew who they were and could like ask them some questions? And it was a single mom who was just like buying diapers and like baby formula every single day at this one like deli, and it was what she could. It made her money went way farther there. The person literally took Valora, like they just tapped phones and stuff and like made it happen. But it was like, oh, I guess this isn't just like talking about it. This actually matters to certain people, and there is like actually for people all over the world when they get 70 cents a day.
Do you think that like on and off ramps between crypto or Celos stablecoins and fiat are going to be like a really big challenge to solve with these merchants?
I got my boy Chris Hughes. I was his mentor. It's a team called Zapote, but they're a branch of a company called ETH Trust, and they actively like work. So they came to the Celo Camp Accelerator. I was their mentor, and then like they just took off. They didn't need. Truth be told, I don't think that Chris needed any mentorship. The dude like locked down contracts with I'm not gonna pronounce this right, like Young Sui. The people who make ATMs, one of the big ATM vendors, like I'm sure you all have used one of their ATMs, automatically put his hardware, because he's both a software engineer and a hardware engineer, which is just a for us, but also he's just deep in crypto. And so he showed me multiple terminals that are about to go live. There's pilots right now in LA. There's a pilot going to happen in New Jersey. And there's a couple other pilots planned for a few other regions. I'm not allowed to, I think, announce them yet. But there's two types of ATMs. There's one that, like, obviously you scan with your phone, your Valora or something like that, and you scan the QR code and then dispense yourself some cash. But also, like, this one's the really cool one because it's super small. It's simply just like a tiny terminal that exists on like a wall, and you like put your fiat currency into it, and it credits your Valora account with CUSD. So, and that's like super cheap to make actually. So, world, like we're actively going to run and deploy them. But not only that, like there's a massive incentive for people to actually own, because the one kind of stupid thing about an ATM is like if you own an ATM, you have to pretty much keep $25,000 cash inside an ATM at any time, which is just sitting there. So you have just like a already depreciating asset sitting there, not earning anything. So if someone owns an ATM like this and they're just accruing everyone's like CUSD, they're actively like have these terminals all over the world that are earning them yield and earning them more and more yield as like these terminals are automatically deploying into like Moolah market or Aave contracts. So it's actually a really interesting value proposition for people who already own ATMs, because if your ATM can do both regular ATM things and accept crypto in a very like unique way, why would you continue to use this like old version of an ATM? And so that's what I'm really excited for, because I also am like super excited by the concept of you guys know like condo loan clubs, like this idea of a no loss lottery. It's like, see, well, all over the world basically coming together and being like, what if we got gifted, right? Like what if like, you know, through a grant or something, or what if someone just gifted a community an ATM and then they all own a portion of that ATM? They're all going to use it. They're all deploying, like they're all depositing and withdrawing, but like that active engine is still like kicking back savings and rewards to all of their addresses because they all like simultaneously own this ATM. I think that's a really beautiful concept, and it's like takes what's essentially something I loved about Black Wall Street and Greenwood. Was like the really cool thing about Black Wall Street in the early like 1900s was that a dollar circulated in the community 100 times before it ever left like this small black community in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And that was like the true power of that community, was that the dollar didn't leave, like they kept sharing it between each other. And so if you want to actually create an engine of prosperity, you have to replicate those types of systems. And the only way to really do that is to leverage people's already existent like cultural ties to each other, but also the cultural ties to things like condo loan clubs and savings circles.
Definitely. I have a few questions kind of to wrap up this interview or talk we're having. The first thing I was going to ask you is, are there any other Celo projects that you're really excited about that you haven't talked about yet that everyone here should maybe look out for? And then my second question was going to be, I know that you have a background in computer science and philosophy, and I was curious with the popularization of stablecoins and just blockchain in general, whether you think there's going to be more opportunities for people with backgrounds in non-traditional disciplines like art, finance, economics, business, people that basically have studied something other than computer science.
To your first question, yeah, I'm gonna plug a couple things. Obviously, I just plugged Zapote and them, but there's a Fresco, which is super interesting, and my friend Deepak is running it. Deepak is super OG. He's done like security for multiple governments, and crypto was lucky enough to have him and his to come to crypto. So Deepak is launching what's essentially synthetics on Celo, and it's even like has a browser plugin that looks a lot like it looks and works functions like MetaMask. But you can essentially like anyone in the world could own stock in Tesla, right? Like anyone in the world could own stock in Apple by creating these synthetics via the Celo blockchain, and that's I think a really powerful concept. It also like puts the history of the stock market a little bit to rest when you start to see it as a UI that's as simple as like a browser plugin, and a lot of people understand. It's something I'm really excited for. I would follow it on Twitter, and it's like @Cresco, and KRESKO, and then there's a lot of there's a lot of cool things being done. I guess this actually goes back to Max's question about the central reserve. When we can also vote to add new assets to the central reserve. And one of the things that was proposed, which I don't know if it'll go through right now, but it will, is adding what's called CMOS, which is like a natural backed asset. It's like a carbon credit asset on the Celo blockchain. And so I'm really excited by more treasuries out there, like more protocols utilizing natural backed assets as like collateral to maintain. Essentially, you're utilizing trees, like you're utilizing saving the planet as an asset, and that's like rad as hell. So yeah, I don't think there's any other communities out there that are actually taking this aggressive a stance and trying to actually create that type of a world. And I mean, the planet's burning, so I might as well try and do something about it. And I think you had a second question. Oh yeah, non-traditional backgrounds are the best backgrounds. One of my real good friends here in New York, their name is Tux. They are a self-taught cryptographer. Like they weren't coming into like the space with anything else than like just kind of being a weirdo. And then there's people who have come from backgrounds in art, and they're running what's essentially like the Sotheby's of NFTs. Like they're actively getting approached by NFTs to the people and they're launching their own projects. Like shouts out to Feltzine. This is new collective. They did of pieces, and they sold out 500 pieces in less than an hour. And those folks, like Deb was running like the social media account for the Smithsonian. Like like he just loved art, and he's really into making art and being about it. And so they're not technical. They weren't coming from technical backgrounds. And I think that crypto actually, you're going to have your engineers, you're going to have your people that are like super hardcore technical people, and they're going to like maybe sometimes have big brain elitist moments. But I think if you actually get those people alone, they aren't really like that. Like the Twitter zeitgeist can be, it can be intimidating, but it's also like, I don't know. To some extent, I'm just like, a lot of people are insecure, and they're just trying to maintain like what brand they've managed to make for themselves. And so then in person, like they're super nice and they're super, and so yeah, the non-traditional folks I think are actually going to be what makes mass adoption happen, because I think we all blatantly acknowledge that there's a big gap between like people who can understand crypto adapt it to other users' lifestyles. And like I think the non-traditional folks are going to be the ones who do it the best because like they can speak to people who are like them.
Well, thank you so much for answering my questions and taking time out of your day to talk. Max, did you have any last thoughts?
Yeah, I actually wanted to kind of ask you, Jarrell, about a question that Alexi just put in the chat. I had a similar question, and it's, I guess, you know, how else can we get involved with Celo? You know, like where can we go to maybe like start thinking about projects that we can develop on Celo, or you know, who can we talk to?
I mean, they update it relatively frequently, and they just have like constant overview of like everything that's going on in Celo and all the different projects. There's a couple different websites like that. But I would also just say like, yes, following us on Twitter is super great, and you'll learn a lot. Following Celo developers on Twitter, you will learn a lot. You know, Reddit, all the usual plugs. But I also kind of want to encourage people to just consider starting DAOs. Like you don't need to know everything about Celo in order to like start a DAO on Celo, and we don't have very many DAOs at all. I think we have one. I helped start it. It's called Prosper. Start these DAOs, then you might get into understanding like, oh, cool. Then we can apply to the community fund, the Celo community fund, to get funding for our DAO, so we can host meetups. Like you guys, Poly Blockchain Club into a DAO easily, and then get like funding from these different like resources, from ETH, from Celo, from Solana, all these different places to run hackathons, to run different projects, different even experiments. Like some of you might be interested in doing like actual research in like various parts of the world, and you're like, cool, I can fold this into my senior thesis project and say like, I'm gonna go to, you know, like try and work from Celo to do these things, like whatever it may be. But I think I'm a huge fan of like baptism by fire. I think it's the only way to really understand crypto, and I think outside of just like losing 5, there's different ways to just like do baptism by fire, and just jumping in and knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know, and then going through the projects that are like going through the projects that are the process to like get some funding for things is actually not too difficult. Just make a good argument and show your enthusiasm.
Yeah, I really appreciate you talking with us. That was really good.